A very warm welcome to all of you lovely people that have come to join me for a short time to take a closer look at the fascinating world in my gut, your gut, all of our guts, and to give you a little bit of an overview and an insight into craniosacral therapy and listening to the second brain. So this is a class that I wrote about the enteric nervous system about 3 or 4 years ago now, because it seemed to me there was so much interesting new stuff on the gut that we need to be able to incorporate that into our practice. And also because of my own personal journey with my gut over the years, it felt like there was a big piece of the puzzle missing for all of us as craniosacral therapists. So what is all the fuss about with the gut? And what can we learn from listening to the second brain with our hands? Let's take a little peek, a little look inside the CLSB class. What's all the fuss about? Well, in my experience, and possibly yours already, so much of our emotional history, as well as our current emotional state, is written in the tissues of the long tube of our digestive system. That tube that goes from our mouth all the way through the esophagus, stomach, small and large intestine, and out through the other end. So the enteric nervous system is embedded in that tube. And it's very much where we receive and respond to our life. And so just as in all the other tissues of the body that we work with, we can register and hold on to aspects of our emotional history here. So if you look at Eastern philosophies, this area, especially the lower dantian, the abdomen, is a real center of emotional and spiritual growth. So a lot of our work, is it not, when we're doing our SCR work, our somato-emotional release work, is actually about emotional and spiritual growth. So why would we leave this part out? Why would we not want to learn how to really listen to the stories there, to facilitate that emotional and spiritual growth where it's appropriate in the people that come to us? So this, I've discovered, is a place where we respond instantly to our life and what we're experiencing, but also where we can kind of almost separate ourselves and dissociate ourselves from our experience and our emotions, sometimes for many years, and not even be aware of it. So it can be a place that's holding many secrets, which could be really helpful for us to uncover. And that brings us really to the bottom line for everything that we do, which is safety. So this part of us is always noticing, always trying to become more aware of how safe we are, registering how safe we feel in the current situation, holding on maybe to memories of where we didn't feel safe. So this part of us has a huge amount to do with feeling safe. And as we all know with the work that we do, safety is the first thing. Safety in ourselves, safety in the space between us and the person on the table, safety for that person. So this hopefully is going to help us to develop that aspect of ourselves and our work. So what can we learn from listening to everything going on in the gut? Well, as you've probably already guessed now, it's a massive opportunity for somato-emotional release work in all the tissues here that maybe were not so accessible before with what we've been studying. Because we know that the more specific we are in our knowledge of the anatomy, in what our hands can palpate, the more we are able to facilitate people's work in that area. So it's also a massive opportunity to let the body show us the root cause of all kinds of digestive issues and dysfunctions that have maybe evaded assistance before. So I'm sure many of you work with people with irritable bowel syndrome, things like ulcerative diverticulitis, Crohn's disease, adhesions after surgery, surgery after tumor removal, for example, in cancers. So many things can happen here and really have a huge impact on our well-being, on the function of our digestive system, on the peristalsis, the movement, which can really reduce and limit the quality of our lives. So now with this work, with the gut class, we have a great opportunity to really get into some of those areas and allow the body to show us what's going on. So we can go deeper, much deeper into this part of us. So a very, very brief, super quick overview of the craniosacral therapy and listening to the second brain class. We will be going deep into the anatomy and physiology of the small and large intestine in particular, because that's where so much of our emotional history is stored, because that's where we absorb or not the nutrients from our food, where we respond to everything that comes in. So we will look in great detail at the anatomy and physiology of the small and large intestine. We're going to explore the conversations that are happening all the time between the enteric nervous system. That's the nervous system that embeds the whole of this long tube, and in particular the intestines. The conversation between every aspect of the enteric nervous system, the gut bacteria, and our autonomic nervous system, our fight and flight system, our sympathetic, parasympathetic systems. We're going to be exploring the connections between our microbiome, the gut bacteria communities, and the universe around us. We know now from new research how our gut bacteria are not confined into our body, but we all walk around in a kind of cloud of bacteria, our personal cloud. And in the class, students have had experiences which have really connected them from their microbiome out into the universal, which has been fascinating and unexpected to me at first. We're going to also look at some of the new research on the second brain and the gut bacteria in the class. So the class will take you on a journey really into the gut, but in particular into your own gut, because I like to be as true as I can be to the wonderful Dr. John Upledger's philosophy, which is that in order to facilitate the process in other people, we need to ideally go on that journey ourselves. So the class will really give you an opportunity to go on a journey into your own gut, to explore physical, emotional, spiritual issues there, so you can really better be embodied in that area to facilitate, create a safe place for the people that come to you for similar work. We're going to look, as I said, at the anatomy and physiology of the long tube, but particularly the small and large intestine, where we absorb the nutrients from our food. So many people ask me on this class, well, are we going to look at nutrition? And I say no, because I'm not a nutritionist, and there are plenty of really good ones out there, but also because that's not my field. And my strong feeling is, which has been borne out in clinical practice, is that if we don't look at the emotional issues, the strain and tension patterns in the small and large intestine and other parts of our digestive system, then just as with the rest of the body, they're not going to function well. So if we have these strain patterns and difficulties physically, emotionally in the gut, we're not going to be able to absorb the nutrients that we want to, even if we're eating the most wonderful diet. So for me, this comes first, or at least alongside any nutritional therapy that we may have. It's where we really respond to and absorb our life. It's where also, of course, we want to move waste through efficiently, the food and then the waste through peristalsis, which is a really rhythmic pulse going through that tube. And it's so important for that to be working well. And this is also then connected emotionally and spiritually with letting go of what we no longer need. So we can see there are so many connections between the emotional and the physical here already. We're going to spend a lot of time, and this is one of my favorite bits, looking at the layers of anatomy, the layers that make up the small and the large intestine. And here's just a very simple diagram, just to show you, just to give you a sense of how many there are. Some of you may already know these really well, some of you may not. So if we start from the bottom, which is the outside of the tube, you'll see we have the serosa or adventitia. It's a layer of fascia of the peritoneum that lines the abdominal cavity, becomes the mesentery, which envelops and supports the tubes. Then we have the longitudinal and circular muscles, and in between those we have the first of the big nerve plexuses of the enteric nervous system, the myenteric plexus or Auerbach's plexus. Then going closer and closer to the hole in the middle, we come to the submucosa, and embedded in the middle of that is Meissner's plexus, the other big main enteric nerve plexus. We then come to the mucosa, which has several layers as we go towards the lumen, the hole in the middle. And we have the muscularis mucosa, a layer of muscle, the lamina propria, like a sponge, open, compressible, heaving, full of all different kinds of cell populations, much of our immune system there. And finally, the epithelium, amazing, delicate, one cell, thick layer, which is becomes the barrier between the tube and the lumen. So this epithelial layer is very delicate, has many different cells, and carries the villi, those delicate tendrils, which allow the food to flow through and the waste to flow through. So we'll be looking at those in a lot of detail during the class, and taking time to learn how to palpate them and pick up the different energies and the different sense that we might have with our hands, so that when we have our hands on somebody's gut, you know how the body will give you a message. It might say, oh yeah, lamina propria, okay, yeah, I know what that feels like. I'm gonna just send my attention there. Here's another diagram which actually was inspired by one of my wonderful TAs, Catherine Whelan, who is here, I believe, with me today. So hi, Catherine. She did a diagram like this, a quadrant of the tube. You can see bottom left, you've got lumen, the hole in the middle, all these lovely layers. It's like a quadrant of the circle. And so my very clever husband, Andy, has made this into a slide for us to explore. So again, this is a really nice way of looking at those layers, starting from the outside with the mesentery, coming through the longitudinal muscle, myenteric plexus, circular muscle, submucosa with submucosal plexus, muscularis mucosa, the lamina propria with lots and lots of immune vessels there, basement membrane supporting the epithelial layer. So all of that is very much going to take our attention during the class to explore and enjoy and facilitate better functioning, hopefully. So what do we find in these layers? Well, it's been complex and fascinating. Each layer, you know, the more I do the classes, the more I learn and discover from people's experience. Again, as Dr. John always said, if you don't learn something every time you do a treatment, then you're missing something, right? So each layer can contain part of our history, physical, emotional, or spiritual, expressed through tension, strain patterns, dysfunction, malabsorption, imbalance of cell populations, whatever it might be. Things that are going to interrupt the good conversations and connection between everything in that area. And of course, no class would be complete without plenty of time spent on the gut bacteria. A huge amount of research recently, and I think people are becoming so much more aware of how important these little bugs are. They're a massive part of our well-being, and a lot of them are in the colon and in the small intestine. And that's an interesting thing, actually, because it was always thought that they were pretty much all in the colon, the large intestine, but more recent research has found that they are also in the small intestine. It was harder to see them there. So, but now with better, more ability to look deeply into the body, we're finding these little fellas everywhere, even in the brain and the head. So more about that on the class. So we know with this extraordinary world of the gut bacteria, we know the gut bacteria are influenced instantly and hugely by our emotional history and our stress levels. So it's not just the tissues and the layers in the intestine, but it's the gut bacteria as well, are just as influenced by our stress levels and our emotional state and our emotional history, going all the way back, and probably back before then to our mother and so on and so forth. We know now that the gut bacteria can interact with the people close to us and with the wider universe. If there are people we hug a lot or we spend a lot of time with, we get to have quite a similarity with our gut bacteria, which is fascinating, and with the cloud around us that contains some of our bacteria. We know now that the gut bacteria are involved in pretty much every single neurological event in the second brain, in the gut, but also the gut bacteria, wait for this, are involved with every neurological event in the brain, in the head as well. So these little guys cannot be ignored. So they require subtle palpation. It's like palpating networks. People describe it as feeling buzzy, very, 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 very busy. And a lot of times in the classes, which has been fascinating for me, they're experiencing a connection really out there into the universe, as well as with the microbiome of the person they're working with. So it's just been a wonderful experience to explore this with the people that come to the classes. Which brings me to really the next very important bit of the class, which is looking at ACEs and the gut and Stephen Porges's work, polyvagal theory. So a lot of you are probably familiar with some of this, and we're going to explore it more from the point of view of the gut, obviously in the gut class. So the ACE is the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. If you Google it, lots of stuff will come up. Many of you may already be very familiar with it. There are a couple of books that have come out of it, which I have found absolutely brilliant and really helpful. One is called The Deepest Well, one is called Childhood Disrupted. And if you do Google it, what you'll find is there's little questionnaires so you can work out your own ACE score, which is quite an interesting thing to do. But the main thing that came out of this study, well, many things have come out. One of the main things was that our ACEs, our early years experience, impact on our mental and physical health for our entire life. So that doesn't mean we're doomed. I'm not saying that, because there are so many things we can do, like have great craniosacral therapy and lots of other things to mitigate the impact. But there is potential impact for our whole life. And one of the things that came out with that is that our ACEs impact on our microbiome right from the beginning. So that's been shown scientifically. So I'm guessing they probably impact on the whole of the enteric nervous system as well as, of course, the rest of our nervous system. which leads me on to the exploration of polyvagal theory. Because we know, don't we, that if we want a really healthy, developed ventral vagal system, that part of the vagus nerve, which allows me to interact with you, to feel safe, to feel relatively calm, as long as the technology keeps working, not to be in fight and flight, to have that kind of social attachment connection with you. I need to be in my ventral vagal system, according to Stephen Porges. So if we're not able to be in there, if we're in fight and flight and we're in our sympathetic state, then that becomes more of our default system. We know that. So we know from the early years how our caretakers are, our mother, our father, the people who have their hands on us, who are around us, how their autonomic nervous system is defaulted, whether it's in fight and flight or whether it's in a nice calm state most of the time. Obviously not always, we are human, but the default state will have a big impact on us. And now the research is taking that further into the impact of that on our enteric nervous system too. So it all kind of is tying together in one luscious, big, exciting circle. The feeling of safety, polyvagal theory, the enteric nervous system, the microbiome, and our early years experience. All of these come together here in the work that we do on the gut with the CLSB class. And Porges' work is amazing on trauma, and it really illuminates the whole area for us, its impact on us. But it also helps us as therapists, I think, to be able to better hold a safe space for the people that come to us. And we know, don't we, that that's the first thing we need to do if we are going to succeed in facilitating their journey in a helpful way. So one thing I found fascinating about creating this class was how all these things, the research in different areas, if you pull it all together, you discover something really wonderful that can help us, help ourselves, and help other people as well. So a lot of the work we do on the class potentially is SER work on early challenges and trauma. It's a big part of the class, which is, of course, really valuable. So that kind of sums up a lot of what the class is about, but how to make it virtual. What will it be like doing it online as opposed to in a classroom? Because where are the props? People that know me as an instructor know that I love using lots of props, toys. I love the interaction with people in the room. So my wonderful colleague, Marianne Sisko, who many of you may have been fortunate enough to do a class with, came to my class when I taught it at the Institute in Palm Beach and described it as craniosacral theatre because there were so many props and actions, which I loved, having been in theatre myself. So I had to think really hard about how I was going to make this work. Because who doesn't want one of these on their desk? Or maybe one of those. So what I did was test this out. So I've run a number of Zoom workshops for lay people during lockdown here in the UK on anxiety, the immune system, and our gut. You can imagine a lot of people, as I'm sure they have been with you, have been really anxious with coronavirus around, me included, because I had it and it was a really worrying experience. We know the immune system is mostly in our gut, 70%, and we need good, strong, healthy immune systems. So I tried a lot of ideas out, very simplified from what I would do with you guys, a mixture of information and people online putting their hands on themselves, with me guiding them. And I was really delighted that had an overwhelmingly positive response. People found it to be really helpful and empowering. And So that was great, and that was really encouraging for me to be able to present the class online to you. Phew, I thought, I think it's going to work. And then I thought more about it, and I think we're going to have some advantages. One of the advantages may be that it gives us such a great opportunity to go inwards to our history there and reflect, whilst we're in a safe space in our own homes, right? The class practical sessions won't be that, you know, we usually have a big room and the buzz of that is wonderful, and you're finding somebody new to trade with and you're getting yourself organized. So that won't be there, but perhaps when you're on your own, there'll be more of a meditative quality about the class. Maybe the exploring of the techniques on yourselves, and I'm going to make sure they're all very accessible to two hands in your own body, under my guidance in your own space, will be perhaps challenging, but also truly empowering, because then you have that ability to do the work on yourself right from the beginning. Plus you get to choose your own toys. Information will come ahead of the class. Oh, wonderful, I saw a toy. Awesome, great, yes. So the quality of the class might change a little bit, but it will have, I hope, a meditative quality, and give you the possibility for deep healing. That's my wish for you, because that's the greatest gift we can give to our clients. It will also be bursting with information on the gut anatomy, research on the enteric system and the microbiome, and we'll be creating our own community of gutsy people in the world. What people have said, alumni have said after the class, they've used this work every day in their practice, that it's clinically valuable. So that makes me very, very happy. That was the whole point, to give you something that's useful and practical to use. You'll have more informed hands, more knowledge in your hands, and awareness of all the different layers and cells that can call you in. You'll have an increased ability to work with trauma, where it has one of the places it has its greatest impact, which is in the gut. And you'll find, I think, that another whole population of people will come to you who are drawn to you with your new awareness and knowledge. And I've been thinking about this. I think post-COVID-19, you know, people are going to be so aware of their immune system and their gut, and really be ready to get in there and do the work. And so I want us all to be ready to support them in that. So we have some resources you may already know about. So last year I published my book with Art Pleasure International called It's All in Your Gut. Let Your Second Brain Guide You to Optimal Health. It's a really important and helpful pre-read to the class. You can get it from AHI. And what a lot of people are doing now, which I find really interesting, what I'm doing, is they're having a few in their clinic to sell to their clients to help them understand more about the gut. It's written as a page turner. It's written through my own story with the information embedded in that. So it's meant to be a really interesting and engaging book. It's not a textbook, because I would have found that dull to write and to read. So I've also done a poster on the second brain, which I find really valuable to have in clinic, to start conversations with people, for them to just look at whilst they're waiting. I've got colonic hydrotherapists who have one of my posters on the back of their toilet door for people to look at and appreciate the fascinating, complex world that they're dealing with. I've also made tummy tracker journals, which you can find on the AHI website, really useful for clients to write down their emotional as well as their nutritional experience each day and to understand it better. So if you're in America, have a look on the AHI site. If you're in the UK and Europe, then there is the link to my online shop, nikkikenwood.store. and you can get anything there. Another place for you, there's free information and resources for you and or your clients, and that's my YouTube channel, which is called Colon to Cosmos. So Colon to Cosmos was actually a name given to the course by one of my early students, which I rather loved. So I called my YouTube channel that. There's free meditations there. If you like, please subscribe, but feel free to share that to give your clients support. But don't think it's going to be too serious, because I am also a performer. I was in theatre, dancer. I love the circus arts, clowning. This is a wonderful quote from a dear friend and colleague from the Institute, Rebecca Flowers. You have to have fun to be functional. So there is me as What's It the Clown. Be prepared to have fun on the class, and I'll see you there, hopefully.